Are are we live? Yes, we are live. Hello, hello, and welcome to a much more common and average stream. Finally, this week with a lovely Saturday stream. As many of you can see, we are rolling on in to a Dungeons and Dragons stream. And today is going to be a very big, full story time stream where we are going to be doing a lot of recapping, I think, as it's been quite a while since we've had a good story time. But don't worry, because we'll be using the entire stream today to tell our little tale. We'll be getting into what happens next as well as a good recap. But before we transfer on over and start getting ourselves warmed up for a nice long story time, how are all of you doing? How have your weekends been? Has anyone caught anything really entertaining to watch? Or have any big plans that this weekend are leading up to? How are you all doing? Yes, and Crazy Seth does make a good point. This is a good story for a party of some almost murder hobos. Not quite. They do have some tendencies in them. And we might be able to get to a very interesting event today. It's 3 a.m., so I'm fooling in bed. Oh, fuck. Impy boy. Going at it real late. I'm sorry to hear that. Tired yet otherwise good? Hell yeah. Taking an unwanted vacation. Okay. Nothing much since yesterday. I finished the drawing and tested my new scanner, as you have seen. Yeah. Marcy L. I saw on Twitter you'd gotten a interesting art up and going. You plan on be doing a lot of that as time goes on? Gonna be doing weekly posts, you think, or more or less time? How often you find yourself spending on those pictures? But as I wanted to be home, yet my family dragged me away. So not so much the time off that is unwanted, but your current location for your vacation. I can understand that. I too am more of a staycation inclined person. But let's see. Ah, there we go. A nice warm fire, an arrayed story, and plenty of time to tell it. I sure hope all of you are nice and relaxed, for today we're having a full 2 hours of Dungeons and Dragons story time. So I'm still on vacation. I'm spending most of my time getting faster and better at art. Hell yeah. Bruh, staycations get me in a different way. They do get me. That's really what I love. Though you have to admit, it really does throw off your sense of time aggressively. If anything, it's been giving me a lot of ideas for writing, as boredom gives me a lot of time for a brain to wander. Oh, hell yeah. Oh, God, he's got a gun. You're right. Maybe this is a bad costume for just a little story time. What do you guys think? What is a good story time outfit to put on? I do like the dapper whenever I'm telling a tale. Although just a cute little hat to help keep us warm this evening isn't bad at all. What do you all think? Any preferences for how this story shall be told today? Think of it like a free costume change redeem. What do? The dapper is nice for story time. I do agree with that. Seriously, 10-day vacation resulted in 1.5k words worth of star system description. Oh, hell yeah. Need a Trilby hat. Goes better with a Tommy gun. Fuck Trilbies. I'm sorry. Canonless, can I just say this? Whatever insane force of society caused trilbies to become more popular or more common than fedoras irks me to no end. I will not acknowledge the trilby as anything but the cringy headwear it has become associated with, and I blame it for the common misusing of calling fedoras the problematic hat. Sorry, hit a bit of a nerve of me. Let's see here. Oh, and if you ever want to see my full list of current hats, this is what we've got so far. The tardy drip would be perfect, but alas, it's not a skin yet. I know, Blinty, I know, and I'll look into seeing if I can get something like that up and running. Hey, if you're a proper 1920s boy, it pog. Nah, even then the fedora was much better than the trilby, and I'll not hear anything to the contrary. But it seems like everybody's excited. Like we've got our new outfit here for storytelling. Like it's time for us to do a bit of a recap. As an artist, I have the power to draw you in a trilby, but I won't. Thank you, Martial. I greatly appreciate that. Now. Let's take a look at my notes and see where we left off. From the past two streams, it seems we've covered quite a lot of ground. The party has gone through one of the darkest moments that any party can experience. The loss of one of its members. Though not due to violence or traditional tragedy. No, the party's halfling bard Milo departed of his own volition, wishing to remove himself from the harsh adventures that had become part and parcel with the party, with the amount of tension that seemed to grow between certain members, and to embrace a world of elven politics, perhaps for reasons of beauty, or for reasons of a more quiet life, who is to say? Though with Milo's departure came a new party member joining. One interesting, heavily armored figure named Perch. A rather awkward man, wearing what appeared to be one of the most expensive suits of armor in existence, made entirely of the rare and magically enchanted Moldir, stood a man who should have held great nobility or immeasurable wealth to afford it. What the party found, though, was a man seemingly a bit awkward around people, confused at times and curious at others. Still, a man so well equipped and with a strong sense of competitive nature to him, the party welcomed him into their group, as they had a new job on their hands. The location of a lost student from the College of Magic within the capital of Corella. A young girl, Anna, seems to have been off on her own, final project, term paper, experiments. The school in Corella has a very particular way of going about it. After about 100 years, all of their elvish students are expected to go off and prove, disprove, discover, or invent something as their final major work. Something that grants them a full graduation and allows them to claim the true title of wizard. Hannah had gone off on her own a few weeks ago It had not reported back at all. This is not uncommon for the students, but one of her friends grew very worried and posted a job at the local guild hall. This job was to find out what had happened and bring word back as quickly as possible. Its pay offered in private, as the school would not support such a thing. But one professor did help fund this particular search mission. The professor in charge of the Transmutation College. So the party began their investigation there, learning from her that Hannah was a very intelligent girl, one with high ideas of breaking the foundations of magic, curious and experimenting with ways to circumvent material requirements for spells, curious about the nature of attunement, and how exactly its rules would work. Hannah, it seems, had set herself up to experiment nearby, in the northern regions of Aethen, within the Authorial Valley, and the ancient wood that stood there. She should not have been gone for a long time, but it had crossed into concern. The professor provided what information she could, though had a personal request for the party. As they are going to be returning this quest to the guild hall, it would likely be a few days before the professor would hear any of their findings. So she kindly asked the party if once they had returned to town, after they had spoken with the guild hall, of course, they would hurry back to the college and tell her exactly what had befallen Hannah. The party did discover one more lead to learn a bit more from. Another friend of hers within the city. A young elven girl named Cynthia, a fellow student at the college who herself was working on her own project, though was apparently doing something more theoretical, something that required less adventure and experimentation, something more in line with the expectations of magic users. Cynthia, it seems, had a very strong art when it comes to enchantment and the creation of magical items, and so this was her own project. The party would find her and begin questioning Cynthia about what had happened to Hannah. They would learn Hannah had a very small group of friends. She was somewhat of a loner, highly competitive, and top of the class within transmutation, someone who even outreached Cynthia's own abilities. Cynthia then explained that Hannah had been so impatient to go about on her business that she hadn't even hired guards directly through the school, but had privately hired a pair of rough-looking individuals to act as her bodyguard. Finally, Cynthia asked the party for a small favor. They should find Hannah either well or not. It seems Cynthia had given Hannah a going-away gift before she had left to help calm her nerves. A small river stone, something Cynthia referred to as a luck stone, that she had provided for her friend as she had departed on this journey. The party agrees to do whatever they can to find the item and try to bring Hannah home safely. Cynthia is thankful, but unable to provide much more information. Back in town, the party puts together what information they can, learns a bit about their new compatriot Perch, and receive a letter from Felix Augustus, their last employer. Sent directly to Rasmussen is a request for the young dwarf, well, the rather old dwarf, to be honest, to take a few days to help train some of the men of the nation of Pulamont. Rasmussen replies quickly that he will be, and gives his apologies to the party for having to separate for a few days' time. He has worked with Felix for a long time and feels he owes him this. Thus, with one party member down and an entirely new collection of members to get used to, the party departs for the Ethereal Valley in the ancient woods to find the missing student, Hannah. On the border of the woods, they find a small village, one which provides them with some interesting information. It seems many students do come through here having a deep fascination with the ancient elven lore. Many believe that from the Valley of Ithoriel and the woods within is where all elves came into the world, and so much magical experimentation and curiosity bears fruit there. While asking around, they eventually find word of a wagon that passed through with two very rough-looking mercenary men guiding a single female student, had departed into the woods. Though little was known about them, the party correctly found this to be the most accurate description of the group that had gone with Hannah. As such, over the course of 2 days, the party begins searching the woods where the wagon had entered. The first day bears no fruit at all. The second day results in a terrifying fight between the party and a group of vine blights, thornies, and with the invoking of Pharaoh's dark god, a pair of will-o'-the-wisps join the fray at the outlashing of Tortuga. It would be on the third day that the party would finally find the trail that they were looking for. And venturing deep into the woods, they would find the abandoned wagon surrounded by ancient trees overgrown with giant spider webs. Fighting their way through the nesting spiders, the party would find a dark scene. In the wagon, they would find the corpse of one of the guards. It seems he had been bitten by one of the spiders and the poison had gone deep into his gut. He had hidden himself in the wagon, probably to escape the spider's onslaught, but the poison eventually took him, his corpse now bloated and stinking. Some resources were found abandoned, and looking about, another corpse was found, tangled in the webs of one of the killed spiders. A drained husk of what appeared to be the second guard, clutched in his hands an old lockbox. The party would spend some time eventually unlocking it and find inside a dark wooden wand, its handle covered in a purplish silky material very similar to the spider webs around them. Beneath the wand, a collection of magical manuscripts and designs that, though the party spent a good hour trying to decipher, were unable to fully understand. Such complicated magic was involved that none of them had the expertise to fully decipher. The final scene the party found was an unfortunately dark one. A tall, burnt husk of a tree with a black charred corpse curled at its feet, its hands clutched tightly, cooked together. With a bit of experimenting, the party would find this to be Hannah. It seems that she had been bound up in a cocoon by one of the spiders at the base of this tree, the ash around it suggesting that she had attempted to make use of a fire spell to burn her way through the cocoon. But through some unfortunate luck, the entire cocoon and web went up in a fiery inferno, burning the tree and, most desperately, Hannah tied to it. Clutched in her hands, the only artifact on her not charred to a cinder. The stone that she had departed with from her friend Cynthia. The party would gather the corpses and make their slow way out, with Cynthia's stone and the lockbox, including Hannah's research. They would make their way back to the wagon. They would spend a night camped out there, debating what to do next. Tortuga would say that they needed to bring all 3 corpses back to the guild. First of all, it would prove what had happened had not been their own fault, but more importantly to Tortuga, believed these people deserved a proper burial, to be given back to friends or family, so that they could say their goodbyes. Much of the party found this to be a disinteresting offer. Lugging the corpses around would be obnoxious at the best of times, and one of them was beginning to reek quite desperately. The argument would begin to grow as some wished for one way and others another. Tortuga would find himself growing more and more angry. The argument would not be abated, though, that evening, as Rasmussen would return from his distant travels. Rasmussen, hearing the discussion, would say he too felt that they should simply burn or bury the corpses here, make their way back and get buried. With everyone turning against him, Tortuga exploded in anger, his mind reeling. How could people not wish to show some true respect to the dead? In his mind, Tortuga sees a village on fire, smoke choking his lungs, a severed head staring up at him as he hears laughter all around. Tortuga turns to the party and says if they're really thinking of leaving these people, then he might as well leave as well. He begins making moves to grab up the rotting corpse, to lug it over his own shoulder, and walk back to Corella. Before Pharaoh approaches and stops him, she apologizes for the crass nature that the party had been taking, and says she thinks she might know something that could help. Tortuga lays the corpses down as Pharaoh goes between each and places a copper penny over the eyes of all the corpses and mutters up a prayer to her god. The smell abates, and the corpses seem to return to a state of rigor mortis, growing pale where they had been infected, inflamed, or strained in color. A gentle repose placed upon them would allow the corpses to remain in a more stagnant state for several days, enough time for them to be loaded into the wagon and taken home. Tortuga nods at this and agrees to remain, at least to the end of this job. That night, Pharaoh and Perch have their own discussion in private. Pharaoh is curious and asks Perch a bit about his past. Perch is nervous and gives half answers before Pharaoh eventually stops and explains to Perch that she lives by her own creed, one developed by the community she grew up in, one that worships a god and believes in a system of balance. That to create good, bad will oftentimes need be done. Perch finds himself curious about this idea of balance, of being able to perform truly good acts at a cost. Perch explains that he's been alone for as long as he can remember. And that it's hard for him to trust people. Farah says she understands and that he's allowed to keep his secrets. As long as he's fine with her keeping her own. The two agree and shake. But from the corner of her eye, Farah peers behind Perch's visored helmet and shakes what she sees from her mind as impossible. Now I believe we are caught up to where we have gotten. The party's tension seems to have grown with this latest event as Tortuga's memories begin rolling around in his mind. Pharaoh and Perch seem to be making efforts, if not to become fully trusting of each other, to at least know what to expect and to create ground rules. Rasmussen has returned, and the party gathers their 3 corpses and plots their route back to the capital, Corella, to turn in their latest job. A failure in some degrees, but success in others. With that, if you all don't mind, I would like to take just a couple of minutes to get myself a bit of a sip to relax my throat before we get into the true news story. I swear whenever I hear Tortuga, it throws me off. Oh, why is that, Impy? You thinking of the location? To be fair, I do think that's what my friend was thinking of when he named his character, but it's a fine enough name in my opinion. Mage schools must be pretty tough if the students are this burned out. Boo! Boo, Marciel. Dropping puns hardcore on me. Oh, you think Perch is 3 tardigrades in play? I have to tell you, due to Perch's hesitance to take off armor, within the party it became a meme to assume that he was simply 3 kobolds in a single plate of armor. And that joke went on for quite a while. Until a later bathhouse episode that we might get to somewhere down the line, where Perch decides to reveal a very interesting detail about himself. Would you ever be available to bounce off a setting me and my girlfriend are working on to DM? Sure. Yeah, no, I love hearing people's homebrew stuff. And if you ever want to send me setting locations, homebrew classes, races, subclasses, magic items, or anything, I am always open. You are free to DM me here on Twitch. You can message me on Twitter or anything that is most convenient to me, to you or to me or to however that would work best. If you would like, I also offer for any homebrew stuff, actually bringing it up live on a D&D stream sometime in the future and kind of having a more broad discussion about it, saying what I like, what I don't like, what I would change or rebalance, and just sort of doing that with a lot of chat being able to put in their own information. I make my own homebrew, so I know having more eyes, more opinions on it always feels great. But if you don't like that, I won't do it unless you specifically say you want it live on stream. So, Love Doctor, if you would just like to hear my ideas on it, you are more than welcome to message me anytime with your own homebrew information, settings, or anything at all. The Tortugan Raiders. Oh, okay, that's what you got you going crazy. Bathhouse episode, long in the future, Blinty. We're nowhere near there yet, but yes, eventually. Of course, Love Doctor, of course. Now then. A deep breath. A moment to absorb. And let us return to a party heading down a road, away from the woods and the village, and towards the capital of the Elven Kingdoms. 3 corpses in their wagon, a newly arrayed party, and tensions growing. What shall the new day bring? Within a day's travel, the party returns to the capital of Corella. Entering into town, Rasmussen can feel the tension in the party growing and decides it'd be best to try to get the job turned in first thing. Get to the guild hall, turn in their corpses, both to get them out of sight and to get a bit of coin into everyone's pocket. Ras has always found that when tensions grow within a party, getting paid tends to soothe things a bit better. As such, the party quickly makes their way in the direction of the guild hall. Arriving outside, they park their wagon and make their way through the groups of other adventurers, messengers, and all the sorts that gather around such building. Perch enters in with a couple of the corpses carried between him, while Pharaoh has the last tucked away in a burlap sack to hide the charred state of it. Entering into the center hall, many other adventurers give them a wide berth. A group bringing in corpses is a bit of an interesting sight, so many turn their eyes and begin listening well to hear what happens. Rasmussen first makes his way to the front desk and reports that the party is here to turn in their successful finding of the lost student Hannah. Receptionist understands and comes forth to kind of examine what has happened and to ask a few questions. The party explains that unfortunately Hannah was already dead when they had arrived, and they had brought the corpses of her and her guards back. The woman asks them to place the corpses down as she needs to go talk to someone to kind of finalize the turning in of this job. As the 3 corpses are placed, the party is caught for a moment as a group of mercenaries approach them. The leader of this group approaches first, gesturing to the 2 guards, as he says, "Hello there. It seems you had found a couple of friends of mine. How are you doing? I lead my own band of mercenaries, and these 2 had been hired off on a private job, which it seems has ended poorly for them." The party turns to this man. His accent seems to be from north of here. Definitely not a local. His dressing, his accent, and the way he speaks seems to come from somewhere of the greater meadows. Perhaps Tverfia or Kosha seem likely. The man explains that he has a small group, originally of 7 men, mostly from his home, that had come down here to escape a war-torn nation, and that 2 of his men had signed on in private to guard a student as she went about some experiments. He asks if it would be fine for the party for him and his men to take the 2 dead and to prepare a burial for them. The party agrees. Tortuga approaches and offers his sincerest apologies that the men were dead by the time they found them. The leader of the mercenaries thanks Tortuga and says that if he or any of his friends are in need of a drink this evening, his men would be more than happy to offer that as their dearest thanks for bringing their friends home. Eventually, the guild hall receptionist emerges with another woman They state that they need to question the party given the fact that the people they had been sent to find had all been dead, and they want to confirm the story to their best degrees. The party nods along. They want to get paid quickly, and if quick questioning will resolve it, that seems to be fine. As such, Tortuga raises his hand and says he'll answer any questions that they have. The hall agrees as the rest of the party discusses the best way to resolve the last two tied ends. They had agreed to inform both Cynthia and the professor as soon as they came back to town, and so decide to split the party into a few groups. Perch and Pharaoh take the box of Hannah's research and the mysterious wand and head in the direction of the professor. She seems the most likely to understand this work, and was the first to wish to be informed of what had happened to Hannah. Rasmussen says he'll go and tell her friend Cynthia what has happened as he takes the stone that had been clutched in the dead girl's hands. Says he'll simply return it to her and explain that Hannah was dead. That left Malachite and Tortuga in the guild hall to answer the questions and to receive the payment for a job done. After several minutes of waiting, Tortuga and Malachite are brought back into a back room where they are sat at a long table. The woman who had come to get them sits across from them and pulls out a small wooden jewelry box. Inside they see an arrangement of similar rings. She places it before them and requests the two of them each place one of the rings upon their finger before the questioning begins. Both of them are suddenly rather nervous, curious what these rings do. They begin standing from their seats. They're not interested in placing anything they don't understand on. The woman calms them, stating that these are simply rings of truth. Good evening, Gandian. That once placed on, they should find it very difficult to lie about what had happened. Malachite is still refusing, though Tortuga eventually sighs, sits down, and places one of the rings upon his finger. The woman begins with a couple of questions. What is your name? My name is Tortuga, he says. She then asks him some basics. Is this your party? Yes. Were you given this job by this guild hall? Yes. Are you seeking to receive payment for this job? Yes. The woman then asks him to answer the next question falsely. She then states, is your name Tortuga? Tortuga goes to say no. As he does, he finds the words catching in his throat. The ring becomes warm for a moment. Then electrical shock goes up his arm. He finds himself reeling for a moment. The woman nods and begins marking down notes in her book. She asks for the name of each of the party members and a basic description. Once that is away, she asks Tortuga about the job, what they had been hired to do, what they had found. Tortuga provides a quick report of everything. They had been going to find a lost student, and they had already found her dead, along with her two guards. He assured that the party had nothing to do with it, and had only found them and returned them here with all due haste. After a moment, the woman nods and apologizes for this next question. She says it is standard for any time a student of the college is found dead. She looks directly into Tortuga's eyes as she asks him, and neither you nor your party, willingly or unwillingly, caused harm to this student, especially the kind that would result in her death? Tortuga states no. The woman smiles, places down her last few notes as she says that would be all. Tortuga finds himself, though, in a moment of curiosity as he glances down at the ring of his finger. He looks at the ring and thinks about that shock that had gone through him as he states, "Wait a moment. I just wanted to say one more thing." Feels himself bracing, relaxing his mind, replaying that moment. "I am actually a giant purple dragon." He feels for a moment the magic of the ring building as it surges into his mind to test his willpower. But Tortuga resists it, and no electrical shock comes. The elven woman's eyes go wide as she stares at the ring on his hand and down at her notes. The woman panically just apologizes and says that she'll need these two to remain here, as she must go get an inquisitor to ensure that all of the reports had been accurate up to this point. As she leaves the room, the two hear the door locking behind her, and Malachite turns to Tortuga and starts berating him for making things so much harder. Tortuga apologizes, saying he thought he could beat the ring and just wanted to try it, but now understands he might have placed them in a bit of a precarious situation. A few minutes pass, and the pair hear footsteps outside the door. It is unlocked as the woman returns with a very old elf in tow. The man looks over the two of them as the woman seems to be in a near panic. The elven man sits down and looks across the table at the pair of them. His eyes go to the ring, then Tortuga. Tortuga looks back, and in this strange elf's eyes he sees dancing magic colors in his irises. There's a wisdom here and a magic that flows through this man. The man calmly asks Tortuga what his name is. Tortuga starts by apologizing about the problems he'd caused, stating that he was just curious as the man holds his hand up. "Please, I just would like to know your name, son." "Name's Tortuga," he says. The man narrows his eyes as the magic dances there for a moment. "Why did you try to panic, my poor reporter here?" "I didn't mean to, I just wondered if there was some way of beating the ring." Tortuga holds up his hand. The man looks Tortuga over once more. He looks back at the woman and says, "Everything is fine here, dear. Feel free to provide them with their payment and collect the rings. I do apologize for the delay in your payment. As you can understand, our friend here was a bit nervous by your outburst." With that, Tortuga nods, returning the ring back to the woman. And after some time, the two are presented with a wooden crate filled with rolls of coins, their payment of nearly 500 gold pieces. The two head outside the guild hall and decide that they'll remain here for the rest of the party. They look about and find a nearby outdoor table where a man seems to be serving drinks to a group of mercenaries. The two nod their heads in that direction and sit down quickly learning that these were the mercenaries that they had handed the corpses to. The mercenaries provide their thanks to Tortuga and Malachite for bringing their friends home and begin telling the stories of the men that have been brought back as they buy both Malachite and Tortuga a pair of drinks. The two begin asking the men about their group, about their friends, and about their past. And so the drinking and storytelling begins. A ways across the city, Pharaoh and Perch make their way through the college district and approach the familiar lecture hall where they had first met the professor. Their strange lockbox in hand, the two approach the front door and quietly make their way inside. Within, they see a lecture is going on, with the professor explaining to a group of students the dangers of the creation of magical items. That if everything's not documented perfectly, each glyph, enchantment, checked, double-checked, and triple-checked, recorded in perfect detail, alignments not kept in exact order, that this is where cursed magic items most commonly come from. The most famed example she provides is an item called the Flaming Sword of Fire. A oddly named item. It seems that long ago, when the first books about transmutation and enchantment were created, many all throughout the world decided to try their hands at it, though none understood the dangers of trying to create magical items. One particular man had become obsessed with the idea of creating a sword that could engulf itself in flames and damage enemies with the fiery attacks. Thus, he began working on combining the glyphs of binding onto spells to try and mold together spells such as bonfire, produce flame, and continual flame, and bind them to a metal blade. His first experiment didn't go exactly as planned. The fire consumed the iron of the sword in mere moments. The weapon could probably make one attack, but it seemed to consume a source of magic rather quickly, its own enchantments. The man thus began trying to invent a new source for the flames to pull their magic from, though he didn't understand the glyphs for such, and began randomly inscribing things. As such, the man produced over 30 different prototypes and versions of his sword, before he eventually arrived at a blade that could engulf itself in flames perpetually and damage the enemy without harming the wielder. However, this was not the most famous of his inventions, as the man, to create gold to continue his experimentations, sold off all of his failed prototypes, which had much worse results. One was an attempt to draw from the wielder's magical powers. However, the glyph was not specific enough, and so the fire would instead consume the wielder as its source, meaning upon activation, the sword would not ignite in flame, but instead the wielder would, and would be almost always killed instantaneously. Another version would draw magic from its source correctly and create a point of fire centralized on the weapon. However, the magical draw caused an irreversible overflow, resulting in someone practically casting fireball centered on themselves. And on it goes. Thus, in the world exists 30 versions of this one magical item, all of which are considered cursed for the fact that they function horribly. and only one exists that functions correctly. As you can imagine, it has created quite a level of paranoia for anybody wishing to seek out the famed sword. With the end of her lecture, the students depart the hall, going around the heavily armored Aarakocra and the strange man wearing the dark enchanted metal as they made their way to the front of the lecture hall. The two would approach the professor, and she would quickly ask them, once the last student had left, what had befallen Hannah. The two would explain to her what they had found, that Hannah had been long dead, and it seemed to have been spiders that she had been experimenting on or gathering resources from that had done it, that she had burned, and that had been a horrible accident. The professor seems quite taken aback. She explains Hannah was very intelligent and that it's a truly tragic event that this had happened in the middle of her experimentation. The two look between themselves before holding up the lockbox and stating this was all they found of Hannah's research. The professor opens the box slowly, and inside finds Hannah's experimental wand. She holds it up and spends a moment looking it over. Curiously, she seems engrossed by something that she sees. She then begins pulling the different manuscripts and designs from the box and glancing through them, reading them over. As several minutes pass, the professor seems almost winded by something, impressed. She nods as she says, Hannah was indeed very talented. Thank you very much for letting me know what happened and for bringing her home. Please. She provides the two with 50 gold coins as a thanks for the quick return and the providing of Hannah's research. The two look between each other, a bit lost in what had just happened, but give their thanks as they accept the gold and depart from the lecture hall, leaving the transmutation professor with Hannah's wand and research as she stares on, enraptured. Short ways away, Rasmussen approaches the last loose end to tie. Hannah's friend Cynthia. Rasmussen looks down at the river stone in his hand, the departing gift for her friend. He places it in his pouch and knocks lightly on the door. The door to the dorm is opened as a student answers it and asks what the strange dwarven man, wants. Rasmussen explains he's here looking for Cynthia. The woman rolls her eyes and yells up. On the second floor, the door opens. Cynthia comes down, greets Rasmussen, and beckons him into her room so they can have a more private conversation. Rasmussen follows her up to her room, sits down, and explains what had happened. That she was already dead, and that there was little that could be done. Cynthia seems lost for a moment. She seems to be just destroyed to a degree to hear what had happened. That her friend had a horrible, tragic accident. She asks if there's anything else she should know. Rasmussen states that the rest of the party is turning in Hannah's research to the professor. And with that, Cynthia seems pained. she expresses concern that she thinks the professor will either bury Hannah's research as unimportant or, more insultingly, publish it as her own work. There's little to be done now if the documents have already been handed over, but Cynthia seems scared that Hannah's name will never be attached to it. Rasmussen apologizes, stating he hadn't understood what could happen if everything was provided too easily, but Cynthia shakes her head and says it's fine. She's sure Hannah's name will be somewhere on it, and if not, Cynthia will see to it that the professor does state whose research this was. Cynthia seems lost in thought as Rasmussen begins to excuse himself. Then he stops for a moment and turns around and pulls the river stone from his pouch and hands it to her. I think this is the stone that you'd given your friend. We found it on her where she had died. Cynthia thanks Rasmussen from the bottom of her heart as she immediately takes the stone and holds it to herself before returning to a jewelry box and placing the simple riverstone in it, closing and locking the box. She then turns to Rasmussen and says if there's anything she can ever do for him or the party, that she is at their disposal for this. Rasmussen begins to shake his head, then stops for a moment. As he asks Cynthia, what is it that you research? You said something about enchantment and transmutation before. Cynthia explains that yes, she's probably second in the class when it comes to transmutative magic. But where Hannah focused in invention of new ideas, Cynthia sought the perfection of current enchantment. She explains that she had been focusing her own research in the movement of enchantments from one item to another, and that she had begun perfecting a methodology that could lift a magical item's abilities and enchantment and place it onto another similar magic item. And that recently she was beginning the idea of being able to record down existing enchantments from a magic item into a book, that they might be reproduced and used to create more versions of these magical items. Well, my time is here and short, but at last I joined for a little while. Good night to you, sour cake. Rasmussen runs through what Cynthia says in his mind and asks if he was to provide her with magic items and a bit of gold for the research, would she be able to copy magic items he had onto different sources? Cynthia nods and said she's able to lift an enchantment from one magic item and place it onto another. This is the cheapest and easiest method she's been experimenting with, but that it will always destroy the original magical item. She said she could probably perform it in a week with maybe 100 gold coins worth of resources. Rasmussen nods slowly and produces one of the shock cudgels he had received a long time ago. Would you be able to learn what enchantment is on this and record it so that it can be placed on any other weapon I bring you in the future? Cynthia nods and says she could definitely do that, though it would take at least 2 weeks of research and double the resources to even begin that sort of powerful recording. Rasmussen nods as he digs through his pouch and produces all the coin he has and hands her the cudgel. We'll try to be back in 2 weeks. Try to figure out what this enchantment is and I'm certain people will be very interested in buying more weapons from you. Cynthia nods and says she'll begin on it right away, and that she hopes she'll be able to produce what he wants as thanks. With that, Rasmussen nods and departs. Eventually, the party begins heading back towards the guild hall to meet up with Tortuga and Malachi. Though unbeknownst to the rest of the party, the two are engrossed in a story told by a strange group of mercenaries. And there we will take a momentary pause from our story, both to allow my throat a bit of a breather and to allow me to catch up on a bit of what chat is going on. Sour Cake, it seems, that had a bit of a tale. Went to a dollar store, and apparently just before I entered there was a fight. People were yelling at each other. I had to walk between a customer and a manager having an argument after I bought my shit. Damn, a real Karen story, it seems. Oh, Martial, I don't know. I would spy on that professor. Why do you think so, Martial? This might sound like a foolish question, but could they bring her to a necromancer? Could have resurrected her, at least long ago, to ask her what had caused her death. It is possible to cast such spells as Speak with Dead, though I imagine to be a very expensive service to buy. Unfortunately, as Hannah seemed to have been dead for over a week, most simple spells any priest or a majority of wizards would know to resurrect her would have already kind of passed their ability to do so. Most spells require a person to have been dead for less than a day if they are to actually fully resurrect the person with their soul intact. Might be, but I thought since there's a mage school, perhaps a necro wouldn't be far. Yeah, but that's very advanced magic to try to resurrect someone who's been dead that long. Unfortunately, in Dungeons and Dragons, such magic has a bit of a time frame set upon it. Basically the time before the soul is considered fully at rest. Yes, just as Vulcan says. But I want to ask you all. Oh, shit. Actually, we'll take a moment here to say, hey, look, seems like we've got a bit of a bot in chat. How's it going, robot boy? eAssassin117. Resurrection is a 10-day limit, right? Might be 10-day limit. And I don't know what level spell resurrection is, but even so, it's very likely Hannah was beyond even that time frame at this point. It'd be difficult and maybe worth checking. There would be nearly 1,000 gold worth of resources to actually... Exactly, stupid android. Yeah. And there's the added detail that she was burnt to a crisp, which might cause things to be a little more difficult. But what do you all think? Was the death of Hannah simply a tragic accident? What do you think of the curiosity of the professor and the concerns of Cynthia? Would it be worth it to try to get the wand and the manuscripts back? Or, since the party isn't really fully equipped to use them, is it fine enough to have traded them away for a bit of coin with the professor? What would you all have done if this mystery was placed before you? And what do you all think had happened to the student Hannah, first in her class at transmutation? And finally, a question I really want to hear some ideas on. What do you think the wand could do? With Hannah's curiosity, her experimentation, and the resources used on it, does anyone have any theories about what she was trying to do? She had her trust in the most powerful spells and wanted to test it as a healing spell. Oh. She wanted the wand to be able to heal her. Or perhaps the guard who had been bitten. But maybe things didn't quite work out correctly. She accidentally summoned a genie and wished, "Make me the hottest witch in the magic school." Ooh, I know. Spirit of the first inventor of the fire sword haunted Hannah, and they tried to perfect it even more, but they failed a roll. So boom. Well, unfortunately, Hannah wasn't trying to make a sword. It seems she had been trying to make a wand. Now, it could have been a very similar design to the sword, but that is a very interesting idea. It was a joke. She cast a fireball on herself. A classic prank. Well. Fine. It seems you all are a bunch of jokesters out there, which is fine enough. A wand? Whack. We don't need it. Yeah, no. So, for anybody who's curious, Milkblade is actually one of my players. In fact, he plays the character of Perch, one of the two characters that handed off the wand and the magic manuscripts to the professor. And that event started a little count I've been keeping on the party for some time. One that I have to apologize to Milkblade for. But I call it the magical item count. This is not how many magic items the party has, how many they have been given, or anything that you would expect. Instead, I have been keeping a detailed count of the number of magic items the party gives away to other NPCs, or just simply casts aside. And let me tell you, it has been a hilarious thing to keep track of. Someone just died and we're making jokes. That is kind of classic D&D, isn't it? Hey, we're the good guys. Someone else might need it more. Oh, his stream ended. I was thinking of dropping in there, but Eric's stream was on. Yeah. We're a bunch of choking copper dragons. That is fucking fair. Very fair. Alrighty then. I suppose that's enough of a break. We don't kill the children or murder the village people. That is fair. They did not kill anyone in the village. Even though they very much wanted to hurt those children. Oh, 4117. Hell yeah, Milky. Shit, you're in second place? Hell yeah. How much time do you need to cut before you're the #1 world best Bionicle? You gotta get at least another minute, right? Hell yeah. Is 40:38. Okay. So not quite a full minute, but just about. Well, I'm rooting for you, and hope I'll be able to catch whatever stream you pull that off in. However, we must now return ourselves to the next part of the story. The part where the party puts this job behind them. After all, Tortuga is listening to a very interesting tale. Back near the guild hall, Tortuga and Malachite sit at a table, sipping at their ales, as they listen to this man tell the story of his mercenary party. He explains that he and his men were actually at one time soldiers from the nation of Taverfia, just north of here, in fact. Soldiers in an army fighting a war against the Grand Duchy of Aethron and its over-pushing territorial expansion across the bay. It seems, however, at the beginning of this war, Tverfia began with some serious disadvantages. They were able to array a rather large army, their serfs and the like being press-ganged, mercenaries being hired, and men like this joining the fray for the honor of Tverfia. They arrayed a massive infantry army with a few supporting cavalry, and began their march into Athroni territory. They were not prepared for Athroni's knighthood tradition. Their heavy cavalry and armored knights tore through the peasant militias that made up Tverfia's army very quickly. And over the course of the first year of the war, Tverfia was in a constant state of losing ground, losing men, being slaughtered on retreat. As such, the man before them had grabbed him and his friends and done the unthinkable, deserted the army. He had taken a few friends of his and made the long journey down to Aethen to get as far away from the Athroni and Tverfian war as possible. There they started a bit of an adventuring route and began going on their own journeys, making their own coin, and being far from the lost war of Tverfia. But in recent time they began to hear rumors of a change in the war front. A mysterious wanderer, some knight and his squire, it seems, had stumbled on to a battlefield between Athrone and Tverfia. As the heavy cavalry charged into Tverfian's sides, as all battles began, and the peasants began routing and running, this one man strode onto the battlefield and struck down several knights alone. At the end of the battle, he planted his banner into the ground and declared himself the judge of Pelor. And it seems this man, this judge of Pelor, had turned the very nature of this war. He seems to show up randomly across battlefields over the past year, slaughtering Athroni knights and heavy cavalry men by the dozens, and turning battles that had once seemed impossible into very advantageous for Tverfia. Now the war had turned from a losing one into a stalemate, where the two armies stared across the river Then at each other, back to their original borders. It seems there is a chance now. With the growth of the judge, rumors abound throughout Tverfia that Pelor is there on the side of Tverfia, that this man will turn the entire war for them and reclaim their lost territory. And now, this man and his mercenaries wish to return home, slip their way back into the army, and fight for their homeland once again. Though as deserters, they expect they won't stand much of a chance on their own trying to make it back and to sneak in. They're making plans now on how best to return home. But as the story comes to an end, Tortuga stares at the man, lost in thought, thinking of his home when he was a child, thinking of the god Pelor. He asks the man, "What was this banner of this judge you were speaking of?" "Well, I've only heard the rumors of it, but it seems to be a simple enough banner." With that, the mercenary explains. The banner is a field of green and a sky of azure blue. Upon it there is a single hill, and on top of that hill a small building wreathed in flames. The man draws a rough sketch of this single building burning on a hill. Tortuga stares. He stares for a long time as the mercenaries excuse themselves. They wish to get a bit blindingly drunk tonight, as they still need to figure out a way to get home. And Tortuga seems absolutely lost in thought. Malachite turns to him and asks what's the problem. But Tortuga does not respond. At least, not in the usual way. Instead, he reaches into his bag and pulls out a flute, a pipe really, that he's only played on one occasion before. To make the shape of a face he had not seen anywhere but in his dreams. He holds up the enchanted flute and begins to play a deep, sad song. Filled with melancholy, the enchanted smoke comes from the flute and begins to create a stage, a scene, a hill wreathed in grass that floats on the air. At the top of the hill, a small church stands. And as it stands, the place seems happy, calm, and peaceful. But as the song continues, flames move up the hill. Smoke chokes the church as the fires reach it and engulf it in death. Tortuga's song comes to a smoky end as everything about him is choked out by the enchanted smoke. The story, and to his surprise, the flood of tears down his face. Malachite stares at him in stunned silence, as do all those around him, including the just-arrived Pharaoh, Perch, and Rasmussen. Tortuga wipes the tears from his eyes as he excuses himself. He states he needs a moment and disappears into the night. The rest of the party gathers together and start asking Malachite what happens. Malachite explains about the mercenaries, about the story they had told, and this man named the Judge of Pelor. She explains that they described his banner before Tortuga began his song and departed. Perch and Pharaoh look in the direction that Tortuga had left, while Rasmussen looks at the mercenaries as he gets an idea into his head. Rasmussen approaches the men and asks if they're still interested in going home to Terverfia, in rejoining the war, and maybe one day meeting this mysterious judge. The men state yes, but they're not sure if they can make the journey back. It is a dangerous trek, one that goes through the Ethereal Valley, and as such is known to be beset by elvish trickery. Rasmussen states he understands, but what if they had some guards on hand? The mercenaries give a knowing nod as they offer the job to Rasmussen and his party to help them to return home to Terverfia. Rasmussen states he'll need to discuss it with the rest of the party, but he suspects that they will all be very interested in traveling there. With that, Rasmussen approaches the rest of the party and explains his plan. That he's got a new job, help these men travel to Diverfia, and then see what future work a war-torn nation might have for them, and maybe learn a bit about this mysterious judge. The party nods along. Gold the mercenaries offering isn't great, but is fine enough. And they are all very curious to ask Tortuga what he might know of this distant figure. Night draws in, and the party disperses to their own beds. All except Tortuga, who finds himself alone on a street in the dark of the city of Corella, staring at a simple wooden church. Through its windows he sees the clergy inside, a few poor men passing around their gruel, enjoying their supper. Tortuga stares at the sign over top of it, the symbol of a sun, the sign of the god Pelor. Tortuga stares, and he stares. Eventually he rises from his seat, holding the black bow staff in his hand. He begins to take a few steps, when in front of him he sees the bald figure of the strange man from his dreams, now standing in front of him. "Who are you?" Tortuga asks. "That is not what you wish to ask now, is it? You are lost, Tortuga." Tortuga's knuckles whiten around his bow staff. He looks back at the man, dressed in the robes of his monastery, one he does not recognize but holds the air of one of his sensei. "I don't know what I should be doing. I don't know who that man is, or why his banner reminds me. What is it you wish to do, Tortuga?" Tortuga closes his eyes, and in a moment begins to meditate on everything he has seen. He hears the man's voice once again. "I will provide you with this answer. You are correct. There is strong similarities. I cannot condone your search for vengeance, Tortuga. But if you are determined to find the truth, I believe that is where you must go." Tortuga relaxes himself, finds a single tear rolling down his cheek. He wipes it away, begins to move. As he takes a step forward, it seems in his meditation had become unpresent and bumps into the clergyman who had just left the building in front of him. "Well, hello there. I'm sorry for getting in your way, sir. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," mutters Tortuga, as he stares at this priest of Pelor. "Are you lost? Do you need a place to stay? Perhaps some food?" "No," Tortuga says. "I know where I'm going." With that, Tortuga goes down the street into the dark of night to return to the party. Or at least what part of it remains at the inn. For unknown to all, two of the party members had also made their own way into the dark of the night. Pharaoh had awoken that night by design, somewhere around midnight or maybe even later. She awakens, gets dressed, and slowly makes her way to Malachite's room. There she knocks softly and rouses Malachite, leans in and tells her, "Tonight is the night. We must go now." Malachite nods and joins the Aarakocra cleric as they go off into the city streets. They spend some time walking around, Malachite confusedly following Pharaoh, Pharaoh looking around before eventually arriving at a dark alleyway. Here, she begins making a slow, quiet way before she stops at a corner and looks into a forgotten hole at the center of the city. Here, three men sit, one of which seems to be passed out, a smoking cigar reeking of drugs beside him. Two more sit on either side of a fire, one of which sat atop a large crate, dressed in cheap finery. He strokes his chin, debating a price for something with the man who sits across from him. A sad, elvish boy. A young adult who seems to be desperately trying to forget something. The man offers him something called orb mead, a restricted drug throughout the world, something known to be magical and highly dangerous. The young man agrees and hands over some coins to this drug dealer, before the man hands over 2 bottles to him. He watches as the young man uncorks one and drinks deeply. His eyes go blue as he collapses on the ground, lost in whatever vision the strange potion has granted him. The rough drug dealer snorts and packs away what he has before going through the 2 passed out men's pockets and grabbing a few more coins. "It is good for you to tip me, I suppose," he says as he places away the gold coinage into his pouch. He lifts his crate of ill-gotten coins and illicit substances and begins making his way down the alley in the direction of Pharaoh and Malachite. As he gets closer and closer, Pharaoh nods to Malachite as she comes around the corner and casts a simple spell, creating a zone of silence around this man. With that, Malachite draws her blades and darts into the area. The man opens his mouth, bellowing, screaming for help. But what little sound he is able to make does not escape the zone. And soon, even his attempts cease as Malachite's blade opens his throat. The man lies on the ground, desperately trying to breathe. As Pharaoh approaches, she places her hand upon his esophagus, healing the wound. The man is alive and gasping for breath. Pharaoh nods to Malachite. Malachite nods back as she begins to grow unnaturally into the massive, statuesque jade form she can take. Standing 12 feet high, she grabs the feet of the drug dealer and holds him up, hung upside down in front of Pharaoh. Pharaoh looks into the man's eyes as his dry voice is unable to scream from his newly healed wound. She says, "Thank you for your offering, and may things find balance. With that, she draws a ritualistic blade from her pouch and begins the slow process of cutting the man's face from his skull, removing the tongue. And once it is done, she reopens the wound she had just closed and allows the man to bleed to death. With that, Pharaoh puts away her blade and has Malachite place the man on the ground. Surveying the scene, Pharaoh grabs the man and drags him over to where the two men are and places his face in the fire so it would burn away the evidence of the ritual. Next, she places a new dagger into the man's back multiple times, creating the look of a furious stabbing, before placing it into the hands of the now drug-addled young man, so that when he awakens, he would find the blood-soaked dagger and the dead, burnt man in front of him. Pharaoh nods, pleased at the perfection of this scene. But as she begins to walk away, she feels a warm breeze down the alleyway, one she recognizes from her childhood, from the blessing of her god. A voice enters her mind. Well done, it says. Reward. Pharaoh looks about and then sees a strange trickle of blood from the man caught in the cobblestones. It seems to be running like a canal between the stones, but instead of spreading out, it draws a line straight to the crate that the man had been carrying it. Opening the crate, inside Pharaoh sees several bags with small flecks of blood on them. The first she removes is filled with coins, about 200 gold worth, which the man had gotten from his deals throughout the night. And the second, it seems to be a collection of the leaf known as Ludden. Finally, she pulls out 2 bottles, each with a single dot of blood on them, and a small canister, like a package from mints. Inside here, she finds small black pellets. Not knowing what they are, she places them back in the canister and places this in her own bag. She bottles the 2 bottles of orb mead away and splits the gold between herself and Malachite, who smiles at the new riches they have been given. The rest of the drugs Pharaoh leaves. It would look strange if everything had been emptied out. However, these had been marked by her god as her reward for her good work. With that, Pharaoh and Malachite make their way through the streets and back to the inn. Pharaoh falls into a deep, warm sleep. She dreams of a clearing, a field of red flowers with white centers, and a single tree at the end of that clearing, with a skull placed in a hollow of it, blood seemingly dripping down the skull and feeding the field, keeping it alive and well and free of danger. Such a night's sleep Pharaoh has not had since scaring. the morning comes, the party arrays outside and meets up with the mercenaries. A new job already in hand. They will be leaving for Taverfia this afternoon, once all of their business is done and put away with. First things first, the party will have to grab what they can from the palace, saying goodbye to Milo and Aquila Andrana, the benefactor who had brought them here in the first place. The party gathers and makes their way to the palace and are eventually brought to the diplomatic wing. There they meet with Aquila and explain that they will be traveling north to Diverfi on a job, and so will not be able to do any more work for her here in Corella. Aquila is deeply sad, but says she hopes to see them all in the future, and should their current endeavor prove not to be fruitful, she and her family will always have work for them. The party gives their thanks and goes across the hall to say their final goodbyes to Milo. They knock at the door, and after a moment, the halfling emerges. Seeing the party that he had traveled with, he smiles, though he seems curious with this new metal-clad figure with them. Milo asks who this is. Perch looks at the boy who had once been a member of the party and explains, "I think I'm your replacement." The whole party goes quiet as they remember Perch's mild social awkwardness at times. Milo seems a little taken aback by this blunt response and asks what's going on. The party explains that they'll be leaving now, heading north to Perfia, and wanted to say their goodbyes, as unpleasant as they might now be. Milo nods and says this is probably for the best, as he's not really interested in venturing anymore, but actually has a goodbye gift for them in a way. Milo grants them his wagon and the pony outside. When they begin to say that they can't take these things, Milo says that, well, I really don't have any use for them anymore. Seeing as I'm in this palace, it seems for good now. And besides, in all the time we were traveling, I never could come up with a name for my pony. The party thanks Milo for his gift and says they'll take good care of her and the wagon. With that, they depart and gather up their new wagon and pony and return to the town center to meet with the mercenaries. They help load the 2 coffins the men have gathered into the wagon. And with a few goodbyes, an explanation of their route northward, the party departs from the capital of Corella along a new journey northward in search of the Judge of Pelor. Unbeknownst to the party, though, just as they are leaving the city, a lone figure is entering it. An older elvish woman, an adult by all meaning. She walks into the city clad in light leathers, strange tattoos coiling up and down her arms. A tapestry of battle scars, and a pair of blades at each hip, her hair bound in a tight ponytail. She marches her way into the city, a letter from her friend Yoleli in her pouch. The woman makes her way to the guild hall, and it makes her way to the front desk, approaching the receptionist. Hello, my name is Velandria. I am here due to this letter. She hands the letter to the woman. Inside, the letter dictates that about a month ago, a private mission was posted here at the guild hall that should Valandria arrive, it should be granted to her. A girl, a student, it seems, had gone missing. Someone named Hannah. And Valandria is to be given first crack at trying to find her. I'm sorry to tell you, but that job went public about 2 weeks ago. We only hold them private for so long. Yes, I understand. I was out in the forest, so it took some time for this letter to reach me. Are you saying that the job was already done? Yes, some adventurers actually did it 2 days ago. Oh. So was Hannah found? Please, she was a friend of mine. I'm afraid she was. Hannah was found dead in the woods. What? Yes, I'm sorry to tell you this. The woman Valandria finds herself stunned for a moment. While she wasn't extremely close to Hannah, she was best friends with the girl Euleli, who sent her to find this woman. Immediately, Valandria makes her way through the city, arriving at the dormitory of the last of their friend group, Cynthia. She knocks, and Cynthia answers, shocked to see Valandria here. I thought you had left Corella for good. So had I, but Euleli had sent me to find Hannah. Unfortunately, her letter did not reach me until just recently. Yes, it seems Hannah died in the woods. Some adventurers were... Yes, I know this. I wondered if you could describe what had happened. And with that, Cynthia provided Valandria a description of the group who had taken this job, of what they had found, and of the fact that all of the research had been handed over to the transmutation professor. Valandria finds herself gripped with anger at this and excuses herself, saying it is good to see Cynthia, but there's someone else she has to see right now. With that, Valandria makes her way to Professor's lecture hall and storms in. An argument is had between the professor and Valandria. Valandria demands the research be handed over right now. The professor explains it is by rights property of the school and will be published within a month's time. Valandria is eventually cowed when the professor explains that the tome will be placed under major authorship of Hannah, and that her name will not be removed from the report. But furthermore, due to what happened 20 years ago, Valandria has to leave the district immediately, or else guards will be brought to remove her. Valandria stares defiantly at the professor before she eventually leaves. She finds herself returning to the guild hall, finding a place to drink. She begins mulling over everything that has happened. If she's to go about her business, she'll need a bit of coin. She's been out in the woods for far too long to have much on hand. So, returning to the guild, she asks for any jobs that might pay well. The receptionist explains there's one well-paying job, but it's a bit strange and eccentric to be stated. Valandria's curiosity is piqued. The receptionist returns from the back, holding up a very interesting package wrapped in delicate paper and tied with a bow, the spitting image of a perfect gift. The receptionist explains a local diplomat had need for this package to be delivered in perfect condition to a group of adventurers on the road. Hey there, Wood Bogus, how's it going? She further explains if the package is not delivered in perfect order, that the sender will know and that payment will be withheld. But if it is done, a payment of 400 gold coins will be made to the deliverer. That is too much coin to pass up, so Valandria accepts and asks for a description of the group this is to be delivered to. Valandria finds her stomach dropping as the description is provided, and she finds herself staring at the sky outside the guild hall, this carefully wrapped package in hand. She wonders what joke the gods are playing on her. For the package in her hand is from some woman named Aquila Andrana, to be delivered to a group of adventurers, including an Aarakocra, a wood elf, a small green woman, a Benar dwarf, and a well-armored man. The exact description Cynthia had given to Valandria earlier this very day. Well, it seems I'll be able to seek my answers a bit sooner than I thought. Whoever you are, I have quite a few questions. With that, Valandria places the package away and prepares her horse. These adventurers seem to have a 2 days head start on the road from her, but if she rides hard and swift, she should be able to catch up before they make it through the Authorial Valley. With that, Valandria departs, hot on the trail of our party. And there we shall be drawing story time to an end. Well, we do have a bit of time left in today's stream. I'm afraid that is all I have prepared for you all for our story time this evening. And it does seem like a very good stopping point, don't you think? I hope you all enjoyed the conclusion so far of the tale of the lost student Hannah, the beginning of this new story of seeking out the judge of Pilar, the mysterious Tortuga's past, and this new figure, Valandria. So, how are you all doing? How did you all enjoy today's story time? And Wood Bogus, you always seem to come in rather late. Do you need me to do a later stream sometime? Or are you the kind that likes to catch up with VODs? How are you doing? And thank you for the kick redeem. I don't know why, but the comment on not being able to name the pony almost gave me a tear. It was a very beautiful moment, Crazy Seth, I'll be honest. I agree. It is such a great moment that occurred. Don't do drugs? Hell yeah, that's definitely the point. It's your mints. Okay, this might be a strange question, but since D&D play is somewhat medieval times, is that toothpaste or dental health? So I don't really tend to think about it too much. I would say probably the wealthier do have some level of dental health, but that's definitely not what was in the drug dealer's tin. In fact, what's there is a very, very volatile substance. Something I hope the party to begin messing with in the future. I swear, Eric, plans ahead where to stop before these endings are always just too goddamn perfect. Yeah, Crazy Seth, I'll admit, you've caught me. I do tend to plan out exactly what I'm going to be doing during story times a bit. I do like to keep you all enraptured and curious. Are you reading or just talking? So I do have bullet points kind of laid out. But you know what? I'll see. One second. Um, one moment. And I'll see if I can quickly pull up what I have written. Oh, that's definitely not right. All right, all right. Let me just shrink this fire a little bit. Now I can kind of show you guys. Let's put this back here. Bit of what I do when I'm planning out these story times. So I just kind of go bullet points just to make sure I capture all the really important stuff. So here I start with my recap. We had Milo departing, Perch joining, and just sort of like this. Then the story begins. I have to cover the return to Corella, Guildhall, mercenaries, the guild request. And so I kind of have it written out like this style, where I make sure I have all my bullet points and major events I need to hit. But beyond that, I'm mostly, I guess, just talking. Most of the connective tissue is just me either remembering or just kind of filling in what I need to. But I do have my major points written out here. Been missing these storytime streams. Awesome as always. Thank you, Plenty Boy. No, I just got off work. I could usually make it to streams, but I got a lot of closing shifts this week. I'm sorry, Wood Bogus. I got you working the weekend. Are you in the service industry? Because, like, fuck, dude. I had to work service a couple of summers, and that is the fucking shittiest stuff. Though, sometimes if you're on closing, you get to be the person that gets to split up other people's tips, which can be fun at times. So you just have, hey, this happened, allowing you to remember the order of events pretty well. Yeah, and to make sure I don't miss any minor events that are kind of easy to miss at times. Though one I did cheat on right at the end is probably that ending portion was almost entirely me just kind of recalling. Kind of those events stick out really well in my mind. So for that, I just needed to write out at nighttime. I need to cover Tortuga's night session, Pharaoh's night session, and then I just kind of knew that I was going to be doing the Valandria teaser. And I had a pretty good idea already what I wanted to do for that. But yeah, that's sort of the basics of how I have this set up and kind of how I go about storytelling. So, what did you all think of story time? Do you all have any questions or clarifications? Things you're curious about? Theories about what's coming next? Or ideas about what happened to Tortuga? Story time is always good. Hell yeah. Thank you, Hulkin. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I do have a good 5 minutes to burn, so if there's anything at all any of you want to talk about, discuss, hear about, or question, I am fully at your disposal. I suppose I could simply say that the drug in the tin, the little black pellets, is something called Zolflex, a rare drug that enhances magical abilities, though at a very dark cost. And they have a chance of inflicting their user with a serious addiction known as Zol Plague, which will consume a caster's spell slots against their will, along with a few life points, just to nail it home. Yeah, what about the soap monster? Where are they going to appear? Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Because it's been a while since I've been able to do a story time, the party is story-wise very far ahead of where we currently are. The party is, in fact, just about to meet the Judge of Pelor, and it was a long journey to get there. We are at least, I think, 5 story times behind where the party currently is, if not more. So we're very far away from where the party currently is, and the party has not encountered any of the lapsus yet. So we are nowhere near the arrival of our soap monstrosities into the story, I'm afraid. And I know, Marcial, I'm sad about it too, especially now that we have your beautiful artwork to look at. I missed most of it. From what I hear, it was good. Well, Wood Bogus, you're always free to catch the VOD, or, just so everyone knows, my D&D streams are always uploaded to my YouTube archive to make sure that they're always available for people to go back through and watch the stories in more of a direct order, which I think is very helpful. But we better start catching up. Double the story times. All right, all right. Well, we can have a bit of discussion of what you guys want to see next stream. I'm kind of out of homebrew material to be going over since there haven't been any new submissions coming through, so we have none of that to look at. But we do still have a lot of country lores we could look at. We could always do more homebrew building with all of you. Or if you guys are really interested, my next few streams, we could focus hardcore into just doing full story times like this. So that we can really try to get a lot of ground covered and try to catch you all up. After all, the last session that did happen, the party did encounter what chat made for them. Yes, the party faced the hag encounter. I'm certain you all are dying to hear what happened there. Let's hear. Well, we better start yet. How high far is the party level-wise? At the time of this story time, I believe the party was level 5. However, in the current campaign, they're currently level 6, though basically one session away from the entire party hitting level 7. New to story time, so you're retelling a D&D campaign? Yeah, the one within. We're currently retelling my current campaign and its ongoing status. Basically just recounting for you sessions that have happened in the setting that I have made with the party of players that I currently have. Oh, you doing stream chat HB stuff? Ooh. Yeah. Chat got a chance to make an encounter to put the party up against, and I had the pleasure of running it against the party recently. And I'm sure you all are curious whether the hag and her fungal friends were able to inflict much damage. I'm back, my phone killed itself. Alright, crazy. Well, I'm afraid we only have a couple minutes left. So, I think here it is time for me to wish you all a good leveling in D&D really does take a while, huh? It depends. At some point you need to talk about Ross's creation. We don't need to discuss Ross's fighting geese, at least not at the end of a stream. We can definitely bring it up in the future, but if you guys want a little spoiler, my party gave me a picture of a goose with a couple of ripped arms sprouting out of its chest and asked me to find a way to make it a canon creature. And so I made up a story of a being called Ross's fighting geese. Basically, a wizard's best friend and worst enemy. But perhaps we can discuss them more next time. Ooh, maybe you could wait 1 or 2 minutes. I drew a little something. All right, Marcial. Do you have it already up and interested in showing off? Because if so, I don't mind. Especially if it has to do with D&D or the party. What do you got to share, Marcial? It's my favorite D&D creature now. All right, fine. I'll describe to you what the Ross's goose is so that Marcial can have a couple of minutes to finish his creation. Long ago, a wizard wished to create a guardian. Nothing so meh as a mimic. Nothing so awkward as an owl bear. This man wanted a mysterious creature that would be beautiful until it needed to be violent. Something that could counter the most powerful magical invaders and threats. So the man started with a simple goose. Ross's fighting geese are strange creatures. For all intents and purposes, for the majority of their lives, they appear to be a normal goose, babbling about in ponds or lakes, gathering in gaggles. They array themselves simply and beautifully, consuming a little less food than your average goose, and being very beautiful to look at. The only time one can ever tell a Ross's fighting goose apart from any other type of goose in the world is when one casts a spell near them. For that is when the truth of the fighting geese is revealed. Any time within 30 feet of a goose, a spell is cast, the innate magical feature of a Ross fighting goose is activated. Immediately, whatever spell was cast near them is counterspelled at 9th level, meaning it will always sizzle without save. But that is not all. This counterspell is not simply dissipating the magic, but instead grabbing the energy and pulling it into the goose. The goose then immediately erupts with two massive muscled arms scaled to the power of the spell that was countered by them. A cantrip will grant the geese a normal, well-toned arms, something you would expect your common monk adventurer to have. These arms can attack twice every round. They deal 1d6 unarmored damage plus 6. They have a plus 6 to hit and are quite dangerous to a caster, as the goose will immediately approach and try to beat the shit out of whoever casted the spell. However, this is not where the danger ends, for the arms grow stronger with each level of spell. At 9th level, the geese get a plus 12 to hit and a plus 12 to damage, can attack 4 times around, and their damage for unarmed strikes is increased to a d12, making them some of the most terrifying monstrosities to fight, not to mention their inherent ability to fly. Worst of all is they tend to congregate in gaggles, so if the wizard should make the mistake of trying to cast a spell to kill the goose, he may quickly find himself outnumbered and out-muscled by a flock of angry geese. My God, Martial, how could you do this to me? All right. I'll share it, but I don't have to be happy about it. For those who are curious, Martial did it. He drew the tardigrade in a trilby. Let's see if I can find some space here to... Here we are. I can't believe... Well, actually, with that size of brim, I don't think that's a trilby. I think that's that might be a fedora, I'm afraid. Which is rather dapper, if that's what you meant to do. Sounds like some pissed off geese. Agreed. But, we are now over time by a few minutes. So, I must wish you all a good night. And I hope to see you next weekend for my Mass Effect stream on Friday and for our next story time on Saturday. I hope you all have a good day, a good rest of your weekend, and a good upcoming week. Nighty-night, and thank you for such a good stream.